Welcome to PRSL Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 432, and this is a live episode. Not a live, sorry. This is an update episode. I'm so used to going live. We've done so many lives lately.
We had back-to-back live podcast episodes, full, longer form podcasts, not just the little mini episodes that we normally do. That's a little confusing, but we're kind of out of the holiday season now, and so we're in it. We are in 2025 now, and so this is our first update of this new year. Kind of exciting to talk about what's going on already in the reselling world. So we'll be talking about what we're doing reselling, what's going on just in general news-wise reselling, and then also we will be giving you those spicy bolos, those things that you should be on the lookout for when you're at garage sales, thrift stores, estate sales, all the places that you might be sourcing. What should you be keeping an eye out for? And I love when we get comments from our listeners, whether it's in Facebook or on the Discord or on Instagram or an email or something where people tell us, hey, I got this major score because of a Bolo from an earlier episode. You guys talked about X, Y, or Z. I found it when I was at an estate sale and I sold it and made good money. So make sure you stick around, listen to the episode because there are some valuable tips for you. So Orlando, how are things going for you in this new year of the 2025?
Well, they're good. They're good. I mean, sales are consistent, but I did see the noticeable dip after the Q4. It's like some magical switch got turned off right after New Year's Day. So up until New Year's Day, things were golden, and then just a drop. I would say probably a 50% drop instantly. And yeah, sales are still coming through. I'm not complaining. I know a lot of people, if I even say that things are a little bit slower, people are like, oh, there goes Orlando. It's the end of the world. No. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you can tell. You can tell it's not Q4, right? I'm not in a rush all day to pack items. I'm not running out of shipping supplies. I'm not accepting offers all day. It's kind of just gotten back to normal. And, I'm kind of sad. I kind of, I do anticipate things picking back up in January. I mean, right now, as we're recording, it is January 7th. And so things do begin to pick up in January. And if you sell clothing, I would say for me, clothing has been really strong January through about April. And so, I expect that to happen. But it was good. I learned a lot in Q4 about how things are shifting as far as in my inventory. And you got to be aware, whenever you listen to people on YouTube or on a podcast and people are thinking, hey, I think things are shifting on eBay, please note that they're talking about their own business. They're not talking about in general, right? Because what may be shifting for me may not be the same for somebody else, right? They may have a whole totally different model. They may sell a bunch of used electronics. They may sell toilet seats. And so what they sell may not apply to what you sell. But I will tell you for myself, what I've recognized is that the expensive collectibles, I did sell a lot, but I sold a lot of $20 to $40 collectibles. That was bread and butter all day long. Kind of like when I was selling clothing, shoes that sold for $30 to $60 were bread and butter. So over and over and over and over again. And there's it's still happening. Now, part of it is because that's what my inventory is now, right? I don't have, a lot of clothing. I would say my store now is maybe 25% clothing, where it used to be 90% clothing. I have begun listing more of my expensive items as I'm moving. So I listed a nice guitar that's worth a good amount of money. Remember those carpets, those rugs? I'm finally going to do something with them. They're going to go on consignment here in San Diego. So hopefully I can sell some of them before I leave. Because here's the thing. In case you guys don't know, I am moving here in a few months. And moving forces you to take perspective of all your inventory. Because when I moved into this new property, I went from being in a condo and I had a storage unit and I had 1,300 items. And I was full-time, but my rent was a third of what I pay now. So it was fine. I did just well. I mean, I would say that was peak reselling for me, because I could make in 2 or 3 days what my rent cost, right? Where it's not the same anymore. On top of that, as I moved, I remember the game plan was I got on a larger property because now I could store everything here. I no longer needed a storage unit. And so I could maybe up my inventory to 5,000 items. I was hoping to maybe hit 7 or 8. But eventually I got to like 3,500. And 3,500 to me was kind of like, okay, if I do more than this, I may have to expand more. And it all depends on what you source, right? If you're sourcing, I don't know, paper stuff like magazines, like you can have thousands of items, right? But if you're sourcing everything, like this is what Mike and I do, it all depends on what that everything means, right? It could be homeschool books, it could be huge toy display, it could be video games, and so you're at the mercy of the space that you have. And so now that I'm preparing to move, I'm going like, wow, like it's amazing how much you can buy and how much inventory you can fit in a space if you're more organized. So part of what fell apart for me was I was super organized when I moved in. I was super organized for about the first 2 years. And then by year 3, I just kind of started getting lazy because I had space. So I was like, I'll just put this over here. I'll get to this over here. And before you know it, I was running out of space. Had I been organized and stayed organized, I probably would have had a lot more space. So now as I'm moving, I'm just, I'm trying to figure out what to do with the excess inventory. Like, do I take it with me, which I think I am? Do I donate some of it? Do I just keep listing like crazy? Do I do a whatnot? Right? The only thing I did not like about whatnot is that, at least for me, and I know a lot of people are really successful, it just wasn't worth the amount of money I was making on whatnot. Like I would spend an hour and I would make on a good day like $200 to $300, which you'd be like, that's good. Yeah, that was great. Like if it's like that every time, I would just do whatnot probably all the time, right? Let's say you could do that 4 hours a day and you can make $1,200 a day. That'd be fantastic. But that wasn't the reality with whatnot. The hype was the very beginning, like, hey, here's a podcast is doing whatnot. Let's get on there. And, I started just selling through stuff. But then eventually that started waning. I know there's an algorithm at whatnot too. And so maybe that was affecting it. I don't know what was going on. But eventually got to a place like I'd spend an hour and I'd make like $50. And for me, an hour selling on eBay, like I could list maybe 10 items for $500 plus instead of making $50. So yeah, I'm just, I am recognizing the feat that it'll be to be moving because I have to figure out, how do I transport things? Should I transport certain things? Should I just count some things a loss, right? Should something just be donated? Because that is the beauty of reselling. When you buy super low, you're not necessarily losing a ton of money. Right, like if I would say my hats, right? I probably have in my inventory like 200 hats. Maybe paid like $50 to $80 for all those hats. Maybe, right, on a good day. So if I do away with those, I am losing $50, $80. But the energy I would spend trying to offload that on a whatnot or whatever, I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe stay tuned. Maybe we'll have some whatnot auctions. I gotta tell you though, Mike. What's the worst part of selling on whatnot?
Oh, the shipping.
Oh,
yeah.
the shipping.
Well, I mean, part of that was just our lack of experience on whatnot and how to organize. Because, I mean, it's like anything. Like when we first started selling, like imagine you first started reselling. If you have to ship a box here and there, it's like one thing here, one thing there. Even if you had 10 orders, you can kind of figure it out. But imagine if all of a sudden you had 100 sales come in and you didn't have your inventory organized. Because part of our problem, because I watched, some of other people's whatnots and how they've organized their sales, how they organize. We were kind of just like, this thing sold, let's put it in this pile. We kind of have a sticky note on it. This listing. And so when we were done, it was like, all right, this person has these shoes, but they also have, and so we're trying to like look around and find the stuff. And I think if we would have had a more efficient system, it would have gone a lot better. So that comes with experience. I think, now you would do much better. Like we wouldn't have that same experience with shipping that we had that time we did the big, Pure Hustle podcast, whatnot blowout.
That was
so
fun
I think
though.
It was fun. I think though, a better organized system and then just learning from people who are more experienced and more of an expert watching how they do it, how they organize, how they set up their listings, things like custom SKUs. Like think about how much of a game changer it was for us on eBay, learning how to utilize custom SKUs for organizing where our items are and being able to quickly pull them. In a lot of ways, people have the same thing with hangers, placard cards they put on their hangers, and certain ways of organizing things so that things are much easier to pull. And that all just comes with experience. And so I would say with anything, that's one of the benefits of starting slow and not just starting full in, because when you make mistakes, they're mistakes you're making at a small level. Whereas if you make a mistake at a grander scale, it really compounds. So that's an option. The other thing, like you mentioned, is donating stuff. And it's not a complete loss because you can still write off the cost of that inventory. You can write off the donations, right? So it's still it's not a total loss. And like you said, it's going to kind of refine and purify your store to the most highest items that are going to bring you the most return on investment and are going to be the easiest to ship, the easiest to for you to move, all of those things you take into account. And then so as you build up, so I mean, if you got a store of several thousand and you pare that down by, you remove 20% of your store, then when you build that 20% back up, you're going to be in a much better place. You're going to have a much stronger, purer store than you would have had otherwise.
No, I agree. So we'll see what happens. I have a few months, but I want to start early because the last move, I got to tell you, it was brutal. Like, what is that saying? Don't ever ask your close friend to help you move. I think that's how it goes, something like that. And hey, by the way, moving tip, I try to move a lot of my stuff on my own, and I hired a couple guys. 2 hours. I think it cost me, I don't know what it cost me, like $120 for the 2 hours, like $60 an hour. And those guys got done in 2 hours what would have taken me 10 to 12 hours. Like, they were fast, they were moving. And here's the thing, they got done early. It was like, it took maybe an hour 15. And my place from my old place is like 10 minutes away. So in that hour 15, they moved all that inventory, drove to my new place, unpacked all that inventory, and they came up to me and they're like, "Hey man, are you still gonna pay us for the 2 hours?" I'm like, "What? Yeah, of course! Like, you got it done early." They're like, "No, there's people that, like, unless we work the full time, they won't pay us the entire until the 2 hours or whatever time is allotted." I was like, "That's crazy." So I gave them a nice tip, but I think
paid
it's worth
for
it.
a job done, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I'm gonna do it again. I'm probably gonna call the same guys and be like, "Hey, can we get this done?" So, anyways, all right. How are things for you?
I mean, pretty good. We're moving into the colder season. Texas, where I'm at in Central Texas, it is colder at certain times of the year than it ever was in San Diego, for sure. But I'm not like most of the country. A lot of the country right now is dealing with like severe weather issues and insane amounts of snow. So this is definitely not a woe is me. But we are moving into a colder season. And so things like garage sales are definitely going to dip and slow down at this time. And so I tried to supplement my sourcing instead of going to garage sales, since there's just not as many, to thrift stores. And again, I found a few that I do pretty well at occasionally. It's not the same type of return on the time, right? The amount of money you can make at a garage sale is just significantly higher than your typical returns at a thrift store. Now, of course, you're going to find the one-offs, right? Occasionally you find that golden grail item at a thrift store and you make a killing on it. But I've kind of decided, I think my happy medium is going to just have to be estate sales. Now, estate sales aren't every day, and because I work full time, I can't go to the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday estate sales. I'm kind of stuck going to the Saturday, Sunday estate sales, and I don't do pretty much any work on Sundays, so it's Saturdays. Like, Saturdays is the day I get to go to estate sales. So that still limits me. So I'm thankful to have those thrift stores to fill in the gap, to kind of be that stopgap throughout the week if I need to do a little bit more sourcing. And so, thrift stores have been okay. I've gone to the bins a couple of times, and I always do fine at the bins. I still am just not going to get into clothing. At some point, I might. I know clothing is already a saturated market, but that's the majority of the stuff that's at the bins. But there's still quite a few hard goods stuff here at the Goodwill bins that we have, and so I do pretty decent at the Goodwill bins, but it's just not the same. Like, you kind of got to switch between mindsets of like, I can almost guarantee if I go out on a Saturday to garage sales, I'm going to crush it. If I go to the bins, I might be pulling in $50 to $100 in profit in, a half hour to an hour of being there, which is not bad, but that's not the only time you spend, because then you still got to bring the inventory home and you got to look at it, and then you got to take pictures and make sure some things work, and then you got to list the items. So it ends up being, not $100 an hour. Like, that's not what you're making by the time it's all said and done. And then when the item sells, you got to ship it. So it's nice to have that as an option. It's nice that I can be on my way home from work and say, you know what, I got an extra half hour. I'm going to stop at the bins real quick. But I've learned that you could still be in January in San Diego and hitting up garage sales. And they're not as many as like October, but they still have them. Yep. Whereas here, I just have had to shift my mindset. This is now my second January here in Central Texas. I have to shift my mindset to, I'm just going to have to focus on estate sales. Estate sales are going to have to be my new bread and butter, my new go-to. And then the things like going to a Goodwill bins is going to be that stopgap during the week if I still need to fill in. If I didn't quite do as well at estate sales on Saturday as I thought, all right, maybe Tuesday and Thursday I hit up the bins and I can kind of fill in what I'm missing there. Because remember, if anybody's been listening over the last couple of weeks of the podcast, I have this goal of improving my store this year 10% every month, right? So increasing the total, like, not the 90-day total. It's basically going to be the 30-day total that I'm looking at there. But how much have I sold in this month? It needs to be moving up 10% every month, so that by the end of the year, I have more than doubled what I did last year, and then sustain that. And if I can sustain that for the next 4 years after this year, then I will be well on track to having my house paid off in 5 years, which is my current goal.
It's interesting you talk about estate sales are like your bread and butter, and that's something that I'm gonna have to figure out too, right? I'm going up to the Bay Area, actually in San Francisco, and I do know people that go out there and resell. They actually go to thrift stores and they find killer stuff. But the people I know up there, they're thrifters. They're not resellers. So I just wonder how it is. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity, right? It's an urban center. It's a city. This is the birthplace of Craigslist, so there has to be, marketplaces. I don't know. It'll be interesting, because that's another thing that people don't think about when they move. If you're a reseller, is thinking of how you're going to source, right? Like, I have a friend that lives in Indiana, and Indiana is really cheap to live, and he's always saying, "Hey, come on over." Your family and our family and everybody's family, like, we can all hang out. And I'm like, yeah, but how am I going to source? Like, will I be able to source? Like, here in San Diego, I can source at any moment. Like, if I need to find inventory right now, easy. I could come up with, I don't want to exaggerate, but probably like 1,000 items within the next 2-3 days sourcing, just because, I know where to go. I mean, I know one thrift store that I could probably get that within 3 days by just going to that thrift store. Right. But anyways, yeah, so estate sales. I wonder if there's what estate sales I will find out there. It'll be interesting. All right, before we move on, in case you're kind of stressing, it's January. 1099s are coming in. You got your tax form from eBay or from Poshmark. Maybe from Amazon, but my Reseller Genie doesn't work with Amazon. But maybe you have it coming from, these sources, and you're like, what am I supposed to do? I got taxes in April. Check out my Reseller Genie. It's a great resource. It's bookkeeping software made by resellers for resellers. And if you use our code Pure Hustle, you get 15% off the first month. Again, use our code Pure Hustle, get 15% off the first month, be able to import your eBay data, be able to be ready for your taxes, be able to track your profit and loss, and various other things. So check out my Reseller Genie. All right, random stories. So, you got one?
No, go for it.
Hot one? No, go for it. Go.
I definitely don't have a hot random story.
I don't have a hot one either. Well, I shouldn't say that, but
yeah, some weeks it's great random stories. This week I don't have anything like super great, but I mentioned a few months ago, I think on the podcast, that I was at like a work event, and then it came up that I did a podcast, and so that kind of got talked about a little bit. Well, since then, one of the ladies who works at our district, she's kind of high up in our district, she's actually listened to one of our episodes, maybe a couple of our episodes, just to kind of like figure out what it was all about, which is cool. She told me that. So a little bit embarrassing, but I was at another work event, and that came up again.
Let's explain why it's embarrassing though, Mike. Why is it embarrassing?
Okay, well, so not embarrassing. I guess embarrassing in the sense of I try not to like talk about I mean, when I introduce myself to somebody, I'm not like, hey, I'm Mike. I'm a teacher. Also, I have the highest rated reselling podcast in the world. I am one of the hosts of that. Just so you know, I am a successful podcaster, and I've got lots of incredible listeners who listen every week to our podcast. Like, that's just like an interesting. Like, it's not a normal thing you tell people.
It's a whole nother world,
right? So,
and then you got to explain that world. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's interesting to like talk about that aspect of my life to non-resellers. Now, when you're a reseller, it's like totally normal to talk about those things, but I had mentioned that like some things actually came out of that original conversation we had. Like she had mentioned she knew somebody who had sold, or somebody had sold wasp hives, like the nests of wasps. And then I started looking that up, and I'm like, oh man, like there's actually a market here. And so, some interesting bolos came out of the conversation. Well, we were at another like district level training, and she actually brought it up. She kind of was like, oh, and Mike has an interesting side hustle to share about that. So I kind of got put on the spot again. But again, it's fun because it opens up conversations with people about what it is we do, right? Like the podcast is a big part of what we do, but the reality is it's a foot in the door to talk about reselling in a way that normally wouldn't come up. Because that's a part, even though people are interested in the podcast and like, oh, that's cool, you got a YouTube channel, that's neat. But what a lot of people are really interested in is like, so you can really like go to a garage sale and a thrift store and make money. And especially because I'm in the education world, and I get to share the fact that, like, one, I'm a teacher and I'm doing this, so it is doable. But two, my business partner on the podcast was a principal or a vice principal at one of the administrators at a school that I used to teach at. And so he actually left for a while the education field to go into full-time reselling. So it opens up the door to talk about the fact that reselling is a legitimate, viable business that a lot of people are interested in. And we've talked about this many times on the podcast, but people used to kind of look at reselling as like, oh, that's cool. Like that's in there a little bit, like they look at you a little sideways. Like, are you okay? Like, it sounds a little crazy when you tell people, but, when you've got the stories, right, and you get to share with people, there's one time, because they always want to know, like, what's something cool you bought? I'm like, well, I bought this and I sold this and I found this old Macintosh hat at a garage sale for 50 cents and it sold for over $100 to someone in Japan. And like, it opens up these really cool conversations, but it gets them thinking about ways that they can make money, right? Because you don't realize how a lot of people are doing everything they can. They're putting in overtime. They're cutting out extra spending, and they're trying to make ends meet. And so when you get to talk to people about reselling and there's that genuine interest, it's just encouraging. It's encouraging that what we do has been validated, I guess, in the public conscious, like people look at it and go, oh yeah, it's a real thing. So that's a nice thing. But even if it wasn't, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact that people are taking it serious as something that they could do. Like, I could do this, I can make money. And so I'd be interested if people are, watching on YouTube now, let us know in the comments below, like how's your experience been sharing that you're a reseller with people? And have you been able to help somebody like get into reselling? And, maybe it's a cousin or an aunt or your coworker that works in the cubicle a couple over. Like, have you been able to get somebody else into reselling? Because I think it's just encouraging to share those stories with each other so that we can see that this is something we're doing to help people. Because oftentimes resellers get this bad, everyone sees us as scalpers. Like, oh, you're the ones that make prices of movie or not movie, like concert tickets go up. And it's like, well, there's another side of this. And so getting to share that with people is pretty cool. What about you, Orlando?
So I want to touch on what you're saying though a little bit, because there's two different things. And I think there's like two groups when it comes to this, right? There's, or maybe three, but I was just at a school event and I was shaking hands and greeting people and everything at the school I'm working. And, I had mentioned some people I had a podcast, and they're like, they thought it was like the most amazing thing. Like, what, you have a podcast? So, and all this stuff. But then you tell other people and, like, oh, so what do you sell? Right. And so for me, I'm like looking at my inventory. I'm like, well, I sold some Hot Wheels today. I sold a pair of Nike pants. I sold a belt buckle. I sold leather sharpening strap for barbers. Like all this randomness, and people look at you like, what? Like, what are you doing? Like, that sounds crazy, right? And I think there is still a little bit of a stigma. I think things have become very mainstream, but I also think the people don't see it. So I still think resellers have an advantage, right? Because a lot of people just don't know. Like they don't know. Like I can pick up a homeschool book like this one for like $1 or $2 and I could sell it for like $30-$40, right? Or I can pick up this hat for 25 cents and I can sell it for $20-$30. Like people don't think about that. And so I get what you're saying. And I've mentioned this story before, but what really changed my mind on it was going to that meeting with all these heads of school and them coming up to me saying they listen to the podcast and they're resellers. I was like, ooh, okay, then I'm not weird. Like, I'm like, this is, because I would say when we started the podcast, Mike, it still was a very unknown thing. Like this was pre-2020, 2018. Yeah, it was known, but not in the way it is now. Like right now, it's like, I think what the latest study was, like 60 to 70 people have sold something online at some point in time. I don't think numbers were like that back in 2018. So anyways, all right. I'm glad. I feel like we live double lives sometimes, right? Because we have this whole reselling world and then we have our education world. All right. Hey, so selling to Canada. So the strike has ended. It ended a few weeks ago. But just today was an announcement made that the post office was going to resume shipping. Well, I had a hockey stick I sold, and it sold for like $100, but the person couldn't buy it on eBay before it sold. And they kept trying to buy it, and it just wouldn't work. Like I changed the price, I did all this, and so I'm like, well, I do international shipping, and the thing on the shipping page says, items that are sold to Canada that are shipped via USPS will not be able to be shipped out. But if you sell through eBay International Shipping, your sales will still be fine. Well, that didn't happen. So I'm like, what is going on? And maybe this will help somebody. And so finally, at first I called eBay once, and the person on eBay was like, oh, maybe it's something on their end. I don't know. Like, it should work out. Like, just give it time. That's all they told me. I was like, what? Okay. Hours pass. I make a new listing. And on the listing, they had told me, remove eBay International Shipping and say that you only ship to Canada on your listing. So I changed it to that, and the person still couldn't buy it. Well, what I found out is that my eBay International Shipping was still there. And if you buy the label from eBay, you can't ship an item that's longer than 48 inches. And the hockey stick was 58 inches. But nowhere. There was no information anywhere. I told them, I said, you guys realize you almost cost me $100 here because there's no information as to what I'm supposed to do. So they told me what you need to do is go in there. First, go to Pirate Ship. They actually told me, go to Pirate Ship. Go to Pirate Ship, put in the dimensions, and see how much label will cost on Pirate Ship. Now, I would tell people, don't go to Pirate Ship. Instead, go to UPS, go to FedEx, and use that pricing. Unless you want to cut the person a nice deal. And it is a nice deal because the hockey stick, if I got the label from UPS directly, it was like $131, which was going to cost me a sale because when I messaged them, I said, hey, just to give you a heads up, it's going to be $131 to ship out. And they're like, oh, that's too much. And then I said, but when they said that to me, I said, but there is this thing called Pirate Ship, and Pirate Ship knocks off 50%. It was like some crazy discount, knocked it down to like $51. So what eBay told me to do was just put a flat shipping cost. So find out what it's going to cost. Don't put in dimensions, and just put what the flat shipping cost is. So I told the guy, I said, hey, listen, I'm going to charge you $65 because I can't guarantee that I can pack this as tight as the measurements are. So I need some leeway. Are you good with $65? And they're like, sure. So I put flat cost, $65. They paid for it, and it all worked out. Okay, got it on Pirate Ship. But the story isn't done yet, and it may not be done until the next podcast, because now there's the other thing I didn't think about is when I sell eBay International Shipping, all the customs, all the fees, all that stuff is taken care of, and you don't have to worry about it all, right? But if you ship directly, your buyer is going to have to pay for those items before they can pick up the item. So right now, I got a thing that, yes, it left Los Angeles. It's somewhere. It doesn't tell me where, but it says import charges are due for this package. Select pay now where available or pay at delivery. And then the next follow-up message says duties or taxes are due on this package. So stay tuned for the saga. The question now is, what does this mean? Does this mean that when it gets delivered to their home, like it's like a COD, like they have to pay right there, right? Or does it mean that they're able to see this and they pay out online? I don't know. People that are in Canada, let me know. If you've had things shipped to you that were not global shipping, how did that component work? Because I also know there was a time that eBay International Shipping had that issue, so we'll see what happens. But by the way, if you're trying to sell and you're having trouble, sometimes you could just do flat cost shipping. Make sure you know how much it's going to cost. Put it in there, and then just choose to ship directly to that country, and that should solve the problem. That all make sense?
I think so. I mean, you know that meme with that chart of like the guy trying to explain a conspiracy, and it's all of the like. Yeah, I almost feel like you need that chart to understand what happened there, but I think I got it.
Okay, all right. So very basic. If it's not letting you ship international somewhere, what you need to do is not put dimensions, put flat cost. Take a look at how much that flat cost would be before you enter it, and then make your listing go live, and then the person can buy it. That's it. So, all right, that is my that, and hey, by the way, I appreciate all of you that listen to our podcast. But if you have questions about, let's say, shipping, or questions about what should I do with eBay or whatever, please message us via email. Please do not message my eBay store. I will not reply. I'm getting more of these, and I don't mind helping people, but I like to keep things separate, right? Like I had somebody saying the other day, message me and say, hey, should I send this Hot Wheels and a protector? I'm like, why are you asking me on eBay messages? Like, just email me. I have no problem answering you on the emails. Hey, one way, though, that you could get a lot of help is by signing up for our Patreon. So one of the reasons that Mike and I have been able to go 433 episodes, I don't know how much time of listening that is, plus all these extra episodes that we have filmed over the years, is because of those that support us on Patreon. And so if you haven't yet supported us on Patreon, I invite you to do so. What this does, it allows you to join our Discord, made up of all kinds of expert resellers that are on there, from people that do Amazon, people that do retail arbitrage, people that do antiques, books, you name it, they're in the Discord. And so just sign up below, go to patreon.com/PureHustle or the link below, and for $5.55 a month, and we're keeping the $5.55, right? $5.55 a month. I think, I don't know, Mike and I haven't talked this through, but for now we are keeping the $5.55. Sign up and it will help you. The rates may go up. We may decide in February to maybe go up to $7, which I think is still a steal, but make sure to come sign up at least for that, that month. So check us out there. And also follow us on social media, Pure Hustle Podcast on all platforms except we are Pure Hustle Cast on X. And as always, you can call us at 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Or shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And grateful for all of you that leave us iTunes reviews. Greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't come on over, make sure to hit that subscribe, smash that like button, and click that bell notification. Yeah. Are you ready to talk about some reseller topics?
Let's do that. Let me get that music queued up here. The new phishing scam, the eBay changing buyer fees in the UK, Amazon reimbursing less for lost items in the warehouse, and Costco not selling books year-round. All this and more on Reseller News. Orlando, take it away.
Okay, so before we start reseller news, I just like to let you know, Mike, that my power might get shut off again here in San Diego at any moment. So,
oh dear.
So again, this is one of the things we talk about reselling. Always be ready to have a contingency plan. I just got an alert from San Diego Gas and Electric that they may be shutting off power soon. So we will see.
This might be a short episode. That's okay. If that happens, it happens.
Yeah. So, but for now, we're gonna keep rolling. So the first one was, hold on just a second. Why? Okay, okay. January 9th, if you're listening to this podcast, I was wondering, Amazon sent out a thing. I thought this was breaking news. And it said USPS is suspending services on Thursday, January 9th. I was like, what? The post office? But no, it's just that day because of the death of former President Jimmy Carter. So if you're listening to this podcast on January 8th and you're rushing to get to, the post office, that's okay. But don't rush on the 9th because the post office will be closed on the 9th. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Hey, have you gotten those awesome texts that are like, hey, you have a lost package in the warehouse. Please go to the link to help you. Have you gotten those at all?
For Amazon?
Just anywhere in your text messages.
No. Oh,
Okay,
you know what?
so-
I did. Actually, I'm lying. Yes. I got it was like a group message with like a bunch of people on it about a UPS or USPS. I think it was UPS box couldn't be delivered because of a bad address. Please submit. Yeah, I got one of those.
Like, so let me read. It says
today. Yesterday.
Yeah. It's all the time. So it says it looks kind of official. It says USPS delivery team, our staff was unable to deliver your package on time because the address information provided was incomplete. Please complete it within the next 24 hours. There's a link, and then it says, please reply Y, then exit the text message, reopen the text message, activate link, or copy the link to Safari browser to open it and get the latest logistical status. Thank you for choosing the USPS team. Now, if I was not a reseller, I wouldn't think twice about this. Right? I would be like, oh, this is a scam email. But the fact that I'm a reseller makes me think about it twice, at least for me. Right? Because I'm like, oh, maybe they got my number, like, from my account or something. Or, for whatever reason, like USPS decided to text me or UPS. But if you're listening to this, many of you have already encountered this. Do not click on the link. It's called, what USPS is calling these smishing text messages.
Not phishing?
No, smishing.
Because what is it? SMS text message? Is that why?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because that must be why. It said the U.S. Post Office is reminding customers the importance of avoiding trending scams while sending and receiving gifts. Perhaps one of the most popular is smishing. Undisclosed text with questionable track information, clickable links should be avoided. And so just be aware. I just thought I'd share this because there was one time I will never click on a link in my text unless I know exactly where it's from. But as a reseller, I was just like, maybe there's something from Pirate Ship. Maybe they got my information from Pirate Ship and I should click on it. Don't click on it. You will lose everything. I don't know if you'll lose everything, but I've watched enough movies that like one click can like ruin your life. So don't do it. All right, that's all I got for that. All right, now this one we talked about in our live. So catch our live that we recorded that dropped this past Monday. But eBay is making another change. And in the UK, now, whenever these changes happen, a lot of people believe it's going to come to the US. I don't know, but I thought it'd be important to share just so you're ready. So let me go to the news story here about this. And so eBay, it seems that they're going the way of Mercari. So eBay, they released details of their plans to introduce buyer fees. This is from this news resource called Value Added Resource, e-commerce marketplace news analysis and commentary. But there's several other sites. On February 4th, they are charging buyer fees. So think like Mercari was charging buyer fees. They are also charging buyer fees on top of the fees that, they end up charging sellers. They're also charging on the other end. And the reason they're doing this is they're claiming that this will allow 24/7 customer support. Buyers can connect with a real person by phone at any time or day or start a chat to get quick answers. I think that's a win because this whole Canada debacle that I just had with the hockey stick, eBay told me, I forgot to mention this, eBay told me to tell the buyer to call eBay and the person was like, what's the number? I'm like, I don't know. Like, Mike, do you know how to call eBay outside of being a seller?
You mean as like if I was a buyer, if I wasn't a reseller? I would just Google it.
Even if you Google it, you can't find it. It doesn't exist. You have to like click like 10 different things to eventually get there. Watch Mike Google it right now and he finds it. But so I think that's a good thing. The other thing they had mentioned is that now when this is private sellers, by the way. So difference between private and business in the UK, private sellers are people that sell every once in a while. Business are people like Mike and I would be considered business sellers. But you will not get paid until the item is delivered. Okay, so when buying from private sellers, funds will only be sent once their item has been delivered. That's a big change, right? Because for us here in the States, right? We do have to wait. We usually have to wait 2 days until our money clears. But if it's item takes like a week and a half to get there, like we get paid ahead of time. So that's definitely new. And they said, hey, we're gonna keep offering more protection, blah blah blah. So I'm not gonna get too much into the details of it, but just know that it's happening. Whether it's gonna affect sales, we'll see what happens. Remember, Mercari ended up doing a 180 on. Remember, they're like, no seller fees, we're charging all the buyers, and they're like, whoops, never mind. And actually, yesterday was it January 6th? A couple of days ago was when they reversed course and their new policy came in play, where they were charging seller fees and lower buyer fees. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
I don't know.
You think it's going to affect sales?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit for me on that one. The audio will be fine on your recording, but it broke up a little bit. So, are we still talking about the eBay UK, or are we now moved on to Amazon?
eBay UK charging fees.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We talked about it quite a bit during our live, but I would say I think it will. I think Mercari walked it back. I think they realized it wasn't a good deal. It really what they're doing is they're just transferring the fee from the seller to the buyer, which doesn't do anything because now the sellers have to lower their prices to be competitive because now the buyers have a fee. So,
but we still have a fee too. So, which is well, if I was in the UK.
Well, if you were a private seller, you wouldn't. But I think the fees only count if you buy from a private seller. So if you're not buying from a private seller, you don't have that fee. So
that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
So if we're talking about just, hey, I'm buying this from a private seller, they're not like a store seller type of a situation, then I'm going to have this fee, but that's going to mean that their prices are going to have to be significantly lower. So that way the exact same, I'm paying the same amount. Because if I'm only going to pay $20 for a book, I'm going to pay $20 for a book. If that means it's $18 for a book plus a $2 fee, or $20 for a book with no fee, right? Like to me, that's how I would look at it. But buyers oftentimes struggle with that when they see fees added. They don't always look at that bottom line number. They're kind of like, oh, this fee, that fee. And it is I think a deterrent. So it might push people. It might almost be in some ways a way of eBay on the surface rewarding private sellers and saying, look, we're not going to charge you. But in reality, it's just going to push more buyers to buy from the big stores anyway. So they're kind of rewarding the big stores. So yeah, I think it's an interesting play for sure. I mean, but like a lot of programs do this. Like think about like any social media. Like social media algorithms boost the posts from big content creators, even if the post isn't as good as a post from a smaller content creator, right? So in a lot of ways, this could be eBay's like method of doing this. How can we boost our big stores, lower their competition, while also kind of in the same way helping out the people who are just, selling one or two items here and there. So
true. So anyways, all right. So more good news. If you sell on Amazon, it's not good news. So one of the frustrating things on Amazon is when your inventory gets lost. So you may put together an FBA shipment, you pack it, you send it out, and then you get this thing. I forget what it was called. It's been a while since I lost an item on eBay, on Amazon. But you're basically like, let's say you sent in, 50 units of a Nerf gun, like 2 of them may not make it. It may be lost in the warehouse somewhere. And usually I keep saying eBay. Usually Amazon would reimburse you, right, for that Nerf gun. And sometimes the reimbursement was actually better because sometimes it was what you had it listed. So if you had it listed it higher, they would reimburse you there. Or sometimes they would just come up with some formula. Well, now it seems that they're going to the lowest common denominator when it comes to reimbursing you. According to the American Prospect, third-party sellers are the backbone of the Amazon marketplace, now comprising over 60% of all sales on the platform. Amazon, for over a decade, has engaged in a slow squeeze of its third-party sellers. 2014, they were taking about 19% cut. Oh, I remember those days. Those were good days. By the first half of 2023, this was up to 45% of the cut of a sale. Now, with the items that are lost, what they're doing is, here, let me get to it. I'm getting there. The current policy is that when fulfillment by Amazon, FBA, loses or damages a third-party seller's inventory before a sale, it reimburses the seller at the full retail cost. These losses are somewhat inevitable with so many goods moving around the country. By one estimate, reimbursements constitute between 1% and 3% of annual revenue for the average seller. I would say that's true, especially when I was doing peak Amazon. But starting March 10, Amazon will only reimburse for a product's manufacturing costs, which is significantly lower than the sale price. This amounts to a fee for sellers who use FBA. They will not be paid as much back for inventory that Amazon service loses or breaks, even though many such losses are clearly not the seller's fault. One seller claims that these levies can equal up to 30% of the total product cost. And I agree with that, especially if you're doing retail arbitrage. Like, for example, when I was selling those Fisher Price, I call them the kid Peloton bikes, they were $60 at TJ Maxx or Marshalls, and I was flipping them for $300. Had they lost one of those, I think I lost one and they reimbursed me like 150, 180. I still was good. But let's say they only end up, reimbursing you what the manufacturing cost was, right? So what did it cost TJ Maxx to acquire those bikes? So it may be like $40, right? So not only are you losing there, because if you paid $60 for it, and they're only giving you $40. On top of that, you're also losing all the time that you spent, the gas that you spent, right? So I think 30% is being kind about it. Depending on the item that you have, you could be losing 50% on an item if eBay loses it. I mean,
Amazon, yeah,
Amazon loses it.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a bummer. I think it's a big hit for Amazon sellers. However, the other thing to look at is it's kind of the cost of doing business on the platform, right? Like they're handling so much of it for you, which is why we're paying the fees on those sales anyways. But I mean, what's the alternative, right? Like you could say like, I might lose 3% or 5% of my sales over the year. Like my total net profit is going to go down by 5% because of this new policy. And that would be pretty significant. Like, I mean, things happen, like things get lost, but I don't think enough things get lost with the partial refund that it would be more than 5%, I would hope, of your net profit. So what are you going to do? Say, I'm not going to sell on Amazon. So I'm going to lose out potentially on thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how much you're selling on Amazon, so that I don't lose this 4 to 5% because of this new policy. So it's one of those things that just really sucks, but I don't think it's going to like push people away from Amazon because there's just no alternative. Like where else are you going to sell like that?
Yeah, no, that is true. And it's good to have that perspective, right? It does hurt. Like you might be like, oh man, I'm losing $40-$50, but in the end, how much money are you making on Amazon, right? Especially if you're scaling. And the same principle goes to all platforms, right? Even if eBay, I pray that they never will, but even if they raise, let's say, their fees to 15%, it still would be worth it to sell on eBay because of all the other money you would make. And I would say use that same principle whenever you're in this place of trying to do something shady, like on Amazon, for example. Like if you want to send in new stuff, your stuff has to be brand new. If the box is dented or if it's creased or there's something, like you can't sell it as new. But I know a lot of Amazon sellers, and I just say I know. I mean, I've seen them on YouTube, like try to send in that stuff as like new. But is it worth it being deactivated? Is it worth losing your business? Like that's thousands of dollars you're putting at risk just because you're like, oh man, I'm gonna lose $50 if I don't sell this item because I dropped this item transporting it from Walmart to my house. Like you need to be careful about that. So keep that in perspective. All right, hey, have you been to Costco lately, or do you have Costco where you're at? Is that a thing?
There's a Costco about an hour away. I do actually have a Sam's Club membership and a Costco membership. So I do drive my wife goes like once a month to Costco to get a handful of like stuff that we can't get at Sam's Club. So yeah, I have been, not too recently, but.
So this could be a Bolo, but Costco is doing away with their book tables soon. Like I would say even in San Diego, they've already done away with their book tables, and they're only going to bring out the book tables during like Q4, right? So what does this mean? I think what it means is if you have the capital, like if you find things that are selling well on eBay or Amazon, like buy the stuff from the book tables, hold on to it for a little bit, and then you might get some nice profit from it. So, for example, my son, I bought him a 10-book set of Hardy Boys mysteries from Costco. It was like $30, but I've seen them on eBay for like $50, $60 right now. But when those book tables go away, right, Costco usually, whenever you buy anything at Costco, there's always that extra something, right? You buy a video game console and it's like 2 years of Nintendo Online, or if you buy, an Apple AirPods, you get Apple Care for free for 3 years, and you get, an iPad or whatever it is. There's always something extra. So maybe a Bolo, we'll see how that goes. But I would say if you're a bookseller, I think it's a good thing for you, right? The fact that Barnes & Noble is able to revitalize hurt booksellers, but I can only imagine if Barnes & Noble went away, the only place to get books would probably be Amazon or some local book place. So, I don't know. Keep an eye on that. All right, and then last of all here, this comes from Yahoo News from Martha Stewart, but Martha Stewart didn't write it. But there's a whole article on how January is the best time to go thrifting, and I agree with that. I've mentioned that before. And so let me read what it says here. It says, schedule an alert on your January calendar ASAP. The first month of the year may be the best time to hit thrift stores and consignment shops, says pros of the thrifting trade. Reportedly, an especially colossal wave of new to you treasures are expected to hit shelves. Better make time for a trip to your favorite store. Goodwill has reported that January sees an increase in inventory at thrift stores. Many of us in the thrifting community have identified January as one of the best times to shop, as we typically see a lot of fresh pieces. So just give you a heads up there. Like if you are kind of like, I don't really like thrift stores, January is pretty good. I've had some crazy buys in January. One of my best buys was I bought about 40 to 50 pairs of Reef shoes. They were like skate shoes. They were discontinued. They were made in the 90s. I paid $15 a piece, and I sold them like within a year or two for about $100 a piece. And so it was a nice pickup. And I've had other pickups. So if you're like, hey, I don't know about thrift stores, maybe now's the time. Because not only that, but a lot of people from Christmas are donating. They're getting rid of old stuff to replace the new stuff that they received. A lot of people are thinking about moving now and so on. So, there's data out there that says January is a good time to source. All right, hey, let's talk about some, you ready to do some Bolos here?
Yeah, one of our absolute favorites, the Bolo.
Bolo. Bolo. Bolo. Bolo. Bolo.
What's your Bolo?
All right. So my Bolo, we've talked a lot about the Games Workshop company's game Warhammer 40K and why the miniatures for that, or even like the rule books for that, can be, those are a huge Bolo. If you can get your hands on them for a decent price, you're set. However, I've kind of been recently introduced to the novels. Now, the Warhammer 40K and Warhammer 30K, which is like kind of, I guess, came before that, is an insanely built out world. So if you're a gamer, it is the lore behind this world. It's kind of like D&D, where there's just book after book of like explaining the different factions and their religious beliefs and the wars they fought. And so there isn't just like a single author for Warhammer 40K books. There are just countless authors that have written hundreds of books and different series, and they don't all connect. Like sometimes there's a trilogy, sometimes it's in this time frame, and because the way the lore is set up, you're spanning tens of thousands of years. So there's all these different books and different parts of this same universe, the same world. And a lot of them are kind of popular and have been mass produced. And a lot of the ones, though, that are really, really considered like the best, like if you're just getting started in Warhammer 40K novels, you should check out, and then they list the different series that you should check out. So I've started listening to them and reading some on my own just for fun. And it's amazing how expensive some of these are. Like if you were to just go on and say like, okay, what's the best one I should read? Like, oh, it's this omnibus like set of it. And so I look up that book, and they're selling on eBay for no less than $275 a piece. Mm. And then you look up another book, and the cheapest you can get them for is $60. And I've seen lots of Warhammer 40K novels at garage sales, and it's one of those things that I don't even scan, because usually mass-produced paperback books are almost never worth it. But Games Workshop as a company has a very, very tight hold on their IP, and they are not... they're known for kind of having, I don't want to say shady business practices, because that's not the right terminology there, but they're known for kind of price gouging things, like really putting prices up really, really high because they know they have a product people want. And they're the ones that publish and print their books. And so they'll print their books and then they'll only print a certain number of them. And then because there's so many hundreds of books in the series, they might not print that version of the book again ever. And it might end up like on a list, like, okay, in the future, we're going to do another printing of whatever this book is. But that means there are a lot of books out there that are pretty limited edition. And so just because it looks like a mass paperback book doesn't mean it's not valuable. And you can usually tell sci-fi fantasy books by their covers really easily. And if you see Warhammer 40K, I would say look it up because a lot of these books are selling for hundreds of dollars and not like special signed editions or anything, just regular versions of the book.
Yeah, no, I can't think of the last time I picked up any Warhammer. I think they're actually more valuable now because a lot of people found out about them, and so they're harder to find, right? So demand is driven up. So, okay. So mine it's an interesting one. Japanese plush. You're like, what? So the reason I bring up Japanese plush is, there's a huge market for like Pokemon and all these different things. And what happens is when you're looking up like plush that's like from Japan, if you see all your comps and they say from Japan, from Japan, from Japan, from Japan, to me, that's a signal of like, that's something I should pick up. Because the only way somebody who wants it is going to be able to pick it up is by going to Japan, right? But what if they're in the States and they want it? So for example, this last Q4, I had a bunch of plushes. So one of them, for example, was it's called Nemu Nemu. It was just a whale. Okay, it was just a whale. It was probably 12 inches or so of plush. I have no idea what it was, but all the comps were like Japan, 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 Japan. So I listed it high and it sold for $56. Okay, I found some other Pokemon plush, but the Pokemon plush on the tag pointed to some store in Japan. It was like some toy store. And when I looked up comps, it was all shipped from Japan, shipped from Japan, shipped from Japan. And I was like, oh, there must be people in the States. And sure enough, like I sold multiples of those Pokemon plush, 40, 50. I remember one selling for 60 something. Like you could sell a lot of it. So keep an eye out. Generally that's to me, that's a good rule. I would say for even anything, like there's some items that I'll pick up and I'll look up comps, and the only comps are both listed and sold are like from Germany, right? So the only way you can get this is to buy it from Germany. The only sold are from Germany, but you got one in the States. That means that if somebody's looking for it in the States, you may be able to get, a higher premium for it. So keep an eye. I've done that with camera lenses too. I had some camera lenses from a pickup that I had. I don't know anything about camera lenses, okay? But what I saw was that in order to get these lenses, you had to buy them from Japan. And so I said, as a result of that, I think I'm going to price mine 25% higher. And sure enough, they sold and I made good money. So keep an eye out. So that is it's an interesting Bolo, but I hope will be helpful. All right, Mike, before we approach the end here, what are you looking forward to?
So for me, it's going to be those estate sales. I'm going to miss garage sales for a little while, but I'm excited to get into that estate sale season. And like you mentioned earlier, even thrift stores in January can be the right time to be hitting those up. So I'm excited for some sourcing and really getting by the end of January saying I met my goal, 10% of increase in sales. So we will see how that goes. What about you, Orlando?
I am. It's interesting, but I'm looking forward to packing because I want this to be the smoothest movement of not just my stuff, but my eBay inventory. Just because last time it was just brutal. It was just the good thing was that I was organized and I'm organized right now. The only problem is I probably have a few death piles that I kind of need to sort out. Like, hey, what am I going to do with this? But yeah, and I probably will be moving into a smaller space. So I got to be smarter about what I do with that. And then, I'm trying to figure out, there's some items I can consign, with those rugs. And I got some other things that I can maybe consign, and I might go down that road. But, I think I'm going to have a different perspective now. I'm looking forward to having less inventory, but being able to maintain sales. with having less inventory, right? Because even right now, like I sell stuff sometimes that sells for like $12, $15, and I'm like, why did I even list this? Right? Every once in a while I'll get like a $6 sale, and that's because when I listed it in 2020, it was selling for like 20. But now that things have changed, I run a sale and it's at 55% off, and then somebody shoots me an offer, and I'm like, whatever, fine. But I want to get rid of all that stuff. Like, I don't want that stuff in my store. I want all my sales to be above $20. So I'm looking forward to clearing all that up and having a more kind of, I don't know, a cleaner store. So, hey, everyone, thanks for joining. Were you going to add something, Mike?
Nope, just that we got to get going to our next live episode we got.
All right. So, hey, appreciate everybody here. Make sure to tune into our live episode that dropped a couple of days ago. And appreciate everyone that listens. And as always, make sure to be real.
Be relevant.
And be reselling.
Peace.
Hustle Podcast guides our quest, learning tricks to be the best. On eBay, we make our name, reselling dreams, winning the game.